A common historical fact is that the concept of microorganisms was entirely unknown to ancient civilizations. Louis Pasteur would not demonstrate the role of microbes in fermentation and spoilage until the 19th century. For millennia, the process was understood purely through empirical observation and trial and error, with no scientific basis for why some batches succeeded and others failed catastrophically. You find yourself in a dark, cool corner of an ancient dwelling, perhaps a cellar or a dedicated storage shed. Around you are rows of jars, some sealed, some loosely covered, containing various fermented goods, pickled vegetables, fermented bean pastes, perhaps even a batch of aged fish sauce. The air is damp, earthy, and carries the lingering scent of fermentation. This is where the fruits of labor are meant to rest, to mature, to wait patiently for the lean months. But for the ancient people, this was also a place of constant vigilance, a battleground against the relentless march of spoilage. Hey, guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that, on the surface, seems like a miracle. We're talking about ancient fermentation, a process that transformed perishable ingredients into long-lasting, often delicious food. It was a lifeline, a magical alchemy that allowed civilizations to thrive, to store food through lean winters, and to create flavors that still tantalize our taste buds today. But here's the thing beneath that seemingly benign bubbling. Lurking in those ancient crocks and jars were some truly awful dangers. You're about to discover why this vital process was also a terrifying gamble. And frankly, why, if you were living back then, you'd probably be spending a lot of time hoping your next meal wasn't your last. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the relief of a successful fermentation. You've put in the effort. The microbes have done their magic, and you have a product that should last. But then, the real test begins: storage. Without refrigeration, without airtight seals, without modern pest control, maintaining the integrity of fermented food was a monumental challenge. A slight change in temperature, an unnoticed crack in a jar, or the persistent gnawing of a rodent could turn a triumph into a tragedy. It's like running a marathon, only to trip and fall right before the finish line. And the finish line is your dinner. You find yourself in a dimly lit, earthy cellar, the air thick with a complex symphony of smells. There's the pungent tang of fermenting vegetables, the yeasty sweetness of brewing grains, and an underlying, almost metallic, scent that you can't quite place. Around you are rows upon rows of earthenware jars, some large enough to hold a small child, others mere hand-sized pots. They bubble and gurgle softly, a living, breathing testament to humanity's ancient ingenuity. This is the heart of ancient food preservation, a place where people tried to cheat nature, to extend the fleeting bounty of the harvest. A common historical fact is that proper storage conditions were as crucial as the fermentation process itself for ensuring food safety and longevity in ancient societies. Factors like temperature, humidity, pest control, and the integrity of storage vessels directly impacted whether fermented foods remained safe to consume or became hazardous Imagine the desperation. Before refrigeration, before canning, before even basic understanding of microbiology, how did you keep food from spoiling? How did you ensure your family wouldn't starve through a long, cold winter when fresh produce was a distant memory? The answer, discovered through millennia of accidental spills and fortunate observations, was fermentation. It was a revelation. You could take fresh cabbage, pack it with salt, and months later it would still be edible, even tangy and flavorful. You could turn bland grains into potent, warming beverages. It truly felt like magic. You observe a jar of fermented vegetables that, at first glance, looks fine, but as you lean closer, you notice a subtle discoloration, a faint, almost imperceptible film on the surface. Perhaps the brine level has dropped, exposing some of the vegetables to air, allowing undesirable molds or yeasts to grow. Or maybe the seal wasn't quite perfect, letting in oxygen that encourages spoilage bacteria. These seemingly minor issues could compromise the entire batch, turning a healthy ferment into a potential source of food poisoning. It's like finding a tiny pinhole in your boat, and then realizing the entire boat is slowly filling with water. You watch as a woman carefully packs freshly harvested vegetables into a large ceramic jar. She layers them with salt, pressing them down firmly, then pours in a brine. The process seems simple, almost intuitive. She's not aware of the lactic acid bacteria that will soon begin to multiply, consuming sugars and producing acid that preserves the vegetables and gives them their characteristic sour taste. She just knows that if she does this, and if she's lucky, this food will last. This fundamental process, used for thousands of years, is the ancestor of everything from sauerkraut to kimchi. A common historical fact is that fermentation was one of the earliest and most widespread methods of food preservation developed by humans, predating agriculture in some forms, and was crucial for survival in many ancient societies, including those in China. Consider the role of temperature. While fermentation often requires specific temperatures, the storage phase often benefits from cooler, more stable conditions to slow down microbial activity and prevent spoilage. But in ancient times, maintaining a consistent cool temperature was incredibly difficult. A sudden heat wave could cause a ferment to reactivate, leading to off flavors or, worse, the growth of heat-loving spoilage bacteria. A freezing spell could damage the texture of the food or even burst containers. The ancient fermenter was constantly at the mercy of the weather, their storage areas acting like uninsulated ovens or freezers. You can almost feel the fluctuations in temperature, the silent threat they posed. But here's where the peril creeps in. She's relying on intuition, on handed-down knowledge, and on the unseen forces within that jar. There's no thermometer, no pH strip, no sterile environment. The air itself is teeming with microorganisms, some beneficial, some harmless, and some are downright deadly. What if the wrong kind of bacteria gets in? What if the salt concentration isn't quite right? What if the temperature fluctuates too much? These seemingly minor variables could turn a life-saving process into a silent, agonizing killer. It's like playing a game of microbial roulette, and your stomach is the spinning wheel. One obscure detail from ancient storage practices is the use of underground pits or caves, not just for fresh produce, but sometimes for fermented goods. These natural, cool, dark environments offered some degree of temperature stability compared to above-ground storage. However, they also came with their own risks, such as dampness, which could encourage mold growth, or the presence of burrowing animals that could break into containers. It's like having a natural refrigerator, but it occasionally floods and is prone to rodent invasions. You lean closer to a jar of what appears to be fermenting fish. The smell is intense, a powerful blend of savory and something else, something that makes your nose wrinkle instinctively. This is jiang, the ancient ancestor of soy sauce and various fermented bean pastes. It's made by fermenting grains, often millet or soybeans, with mold and then aging them in brine. When done correctly, it produces a rich, umami-packed condiment that transforms bland food into something extraordinary. But when it goes wrong, oh boy, does it go wrong. The academic debate surrounding storage failures often delves into the specific types of spoilage organisms that thrived in ancient storage conditions and their impact on food security. While we know about mold and yeast, pinpointing the exact species and their toxin production in ancient contexts is challenging. Historians and archaeologists debate how much food loss due to improper storage contributed to overall food scarcity, and whether certain dynasties or regions developed more effective, large-scale storage solutions that significantly reduced this waste. It's like trying to calculate how much food was silently stolen by invisible enemies over thousands of years. Imagine the early experiments. Someone leaves a batch of grains out. They get moldy. Then they get wet. And eventually, they taste interesting. Sometimes, that interesting was delicious and safe. Other times, it was a one-way ticket to a very unpleasant, or even fatal, digestive upset. There was no scientific method, no peer-reviewed studies, just trial and error, often with grim consequences. The very air you breathe in this cellar, while seemingly still, is a microscopic battlefield where beneficial bacteria fight for dominance against insidious pathogens. You also witness the constant battle against pests, rodents, drawn by the scent of food, would gnaw through wooden lids, burrow under earthen jars, or squeeze through tiny cracks in storage areas. Their droppings and urine would contaminate the food, introducing harmful bacteria and viruses. Insects, particularly weevils and mites, could infest grains and dried fermented products, rendering them inedible or dangerous. The ancient people fought this war with limited tools, cats, traps, and vigilant inspection, but the pests were relentless. It's like trying to guard a treasure chest when 1,000 tiny thieves are constantly trying to break in. One obscure detail from ancient fermentation practices is the use of ku, a complex starter culture often made from grains inoculated with various molds, yeasts, and bacteria. This ku was essential for making fermented grain products like jiang and alcoholic beverages. However, the exact composition of ku varied wildly from region to region, and even from batch to batch, making the outcome highly unpredictable. It's like trying to bake a cake with a secret ingredient that changes every time. And sometimes that secret ingredient is just poison. The integrity of the storage vessels themselves was a critical factor. Earthenware jars, while common, were porous and could crack. Wooden barrels could leak or warp. Bamboo containers might not provide sufficient protection against moisture or pests. Any compromise in the container could expose the fermented food to air, moisture, or contaminants, leading to spoilage. The ancient fermenter had to constantly inspect their vessels, patching cracks and replacing damaged lids, a never-ending chore. It's like trying to keep water in a leaky bucket, but the water is your entire winter food supply. The academic debate surrounding ancient fermentation often centers on the specific types of harmful microorganisms that were prevalent in the illnesses they caused. While we know about general food poisoning, pinpointing specific ancient outbreaks caused by, say, Clostridium botulinum, which produces botulinum toxin, a deadly neurotoxin that thrives in anaerobic, low-acid environments. Precisely the conditions found in some fermented foods is incredibly difficult without modern diagnostic tools. Historians and microbiologists still debate the true mortality rates attributable to such unseen threats. Was it a constant, low-level drain on the population? Or did it manifest in more acute, localized epidemics? Consider the dangers of secondary fermentation. Sometimes, a ferment that seemed stable could reactivate during storage, particularly if the temperature rose or if new sugars were introduced. This secondary fermentation could lead to excessive gas production, potentially bursting jars, or, more dangerously, could allow undesirable microbes to flourish, producing off flavors or toxins. The ancient people had no way to control or predict these spontaneous refermentations, making them a constant source of anxiety. It's like your food suddenly deciding to throw a wild party inside its container, and you're not invited. But you'll pay the price. You notice the lack of precise measurements. A handful of salt, a splash of water, a just right amount of time. These are the instructions passed down. There's no concept of grams or liters, no understanding of pH levels. This imprecision, while often leading to perfectly safe results, also created a wide margin for error. Too little salt, and harmful bacteria could flourish. Too much, and the fermentation might stall, leaving the food vulnerable to spoilage. It's like trying to navigate a minefield with a map drawn by a toddler. The lack of understanding about anaerobic versus aerobic conditions was another vulnerability. Some ferments, like certain pickles, thrive with some exposure to air. Others, like many traditional jiang or some alcoholic beverages, require strictly anaerobic, oxygen-free conditions to prevent spoilage and toxin production. If an anaerobic ferment was exposed to air during storage, it could quickly become contaminated by aerobic spoilage organisms. The ancient fermenter relied on empirical knowledge, but a slight misstep in sealing could have dire consequences. It's like trying to keep a fish alive in the desert, or a camel underwater. The containers themselves posed a risk. Earthenware jars, while porous and breathable, which can be good for some ferments, could also harbor residual bacteria from previous batches, or cracks could become breeding grounds for unwanted microbes. There was no sterilization, no bleach, just a good scrub with water, which, remember, was probably teeming with its own set of dangers. You can almost feel the rough texture of the clay, imagining the tiny crevices where danger might lurk. You might hear stories of exploding jars, a terrifying reality caused by excessive gas buildup from uncontrolled fermentation, while sometimes just a messy inconvenience. A bursting jar could also signify a dangerous microbial process at work, a warning that the contents were no longer safe. These incidents, though dramatic, were grim lessons in the unpredictable nature of fermentation and storage. It's a bit like your food trying to escape its container, and it's not being polite about it. Consider the desperate times. During famines, people might be tempted to ferment anything they could get their hands on, even plants that were marginally edible, or potentially toxic if not processed correctly. The desperate need for calories could override any caution, turning a risky process into a suicidal gamble. Imagine the gnawing hunger, the blurred lines between edible and deadly, as you try to make something, anything, last. The academic debate also touches upon the role of traditional rituals and superstitions in mitigating storage risks. Did certain prayers or offerings made before storage inadvertently encourage better practices, more careful sealing, or simply provide psychological comfort in the face of unpredictable outcomes? How did cultural beliefs about good and bad spirits influence the physical environment and practices of food storage? It's a fascinating interplay between the mystical and the mundane. The smells in the cellar, while mostly pungent, also hold a hint of something foul. A slight sourness that's off, a faint metallic tang, or a sickly sweet odor that signals putrefaction rather than beneficial fermentation. These are the subtle warnings, often missed or ignored in the desperate hope that the food is still good. Your ancient nose, finely attuned to the nuances of decay, would be your first and often only line of defense. But even the keenest nose can be fooled. You realize that for the ancient Chinese, the act of storing fermented food was a continuous act of faith and vigilance. They had transformed perishable goods into long-lasting sustenance. But the battle wasn't over. The silent, unseen forces of decay, the relentless pests, and the unpredictable environment were constant threats, turning the very promise of preservation into a recurring nightmare. The process of making alcoholic beverages, like rice wine or millet beer, also carried significant risks. While fermentation produced alcohol, which is itself a preservative, incorrect methods could lead to the growth of undesirable microorganisms that produced toxins. Furthermore, the distillation process, which came much later, but even early forms of concentration could concentrate harmful compounds. And, of course, there was the ever-present danger of overconsumption, leading to acute alcohol poisoning. It's like they were brewing their own ancient cocktails, but some of them came with a very nasty surprise. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost feel the dampness of the ancient cellar, the faint, unsettling smell of spoilage, and the gnawing anxiety of a precious food supply under siege. You gain a profound appreciation for our modern climate-controlled storage, our airtight containers, and our understanding of microbial control. The ancient world, for all its ingenuity, was a much riskier place to keep food, a constant dance with the unseen forces of decay. And as the soft, earthy smells of the cellar begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every stored jar. The trial and error nature of learning fermentation meant that generations suffered through illness and death before effective, relatively safe methods were established. Every successful batch was a victory, every spoiled batch a potential tragedy. The knowledge they accumulated was literally written in the suffering of their ancestors. It's a grim thought, but true. You've witnessed the precarious balance of food storage, where even a successful ferment could turn treacherous. Now, let's dive into a specific and often profoundly dangerous realm of ancient fermentation, the production of alcoholic beverages. For millennia, alcohol has been a part of human culture for rituals, celebrations, medicine, and simply for escape. But in ancient China, without modern understanding or control, The pursuit of that buzz could lead to a terrifying abyss, where potent drinks harbored deadly secrets. And the line between revelry and ruin was perilously thin. You might hear hushed stories of families who ate a batch of fermented vegetables and never woke up, or of entire villages struck down by a mysterious illness after consuming a communal brew. These cautionary tales, passed down through generations, were a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking in the most vital of food processes. They were the ancient equivalent of a public health warning, delivered by word of mouth and grim experience. You find yourself in a bustling, ancient brewery, the air thick with the sweet, heavy scent of fermenting grains, mostly rice in the south, millet in the north. Large, unglazed ceramic vats line the walls, their surfaces often stained with the residue of countless batches. The bubbling sound is more vigorous here, a lively hiss and gurgle that promises warmth and merriment. You see men and women, often with flushed faces, tending to the vats, stirring the mash, and preparing the distillation, or more accurately, concentration equipment. This isn't just about making a drink. It's about harnessing powerful, unpredictable forces. And sometimes, those forces fought back. The absence of scientific understanding meant that the reasons for success or failure were often attributed to supernatural forces, blessings from ancestors, or the displeasure of spirits. A good batch was a gift from the heavens, a bad one, a curse. This lack of empirical understanding made it difficult to consistently replicate safe results, leaving much to chance. It's like trying to fix a broken car by praying to the engine. Imagine the allure. After a long, hard day in the fields, or a stressful period of famine, a cup of fermented grain wine or beer offered a temporary respite, a moment of warmth and forgetfulness. It could loosen tongues, foster camaraderie, and elevate spirits. For the ancient Chinese, alcohol was often seen as a gift from the heavens, a bridge to the divine during ancestral ceremonies, or a vital component of social gatherings. But this gift came with a hidden price, a dark side that could turn celebration into tragedy. It's like being promised a magical carpet ride, but sometimes the carpet decides to fly straight into a brick wall. As you stand in this ancient fermentation cellar, surrounded by the subtle hum of microbial activity, you gain a profound respect for the courage and resilience of the people who relied on this process. They embraced a technique that was both their salvation and a constant source of peril, navigating its unseen dangers with only their senses and their accumulated, hard-won knowledge. The very act of eating fermented food was an act of faith, a gamble against the invisible forces of the microbial world, and as the soft, earthy smells of the cellar begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling jar. A common historical fact is that alcoholic beverages, primarily made from fermented grains like rice and millet, have been produced in China for at least 9,000 years, with archaeological evidence of sophisticated brewing techniques dating back to the Neolithic period. These early drinks were often cloudy, low-alcohol brews, more akin to modern beers or weak wines. You've felt the unsettling tension in that ancient cellar, the subtle hint of danger lurking beneath the promise of preservation. Now, let's zoom in, way in, beyond what the ancient eye could ever perceive. We're talking about the true masters of fermentation, the unseen architects of both life and death microbes. Tonight, you'll journey into the microscopic battlefield within those bubbling jars, where beneficial transformations could turn deadly, and where an invisible army of bacteria, yeasts, and molds decided the fate of every meal. You observe the raw materials. Grains are cooked and then mixed with qu, that complex starter culture we talked about earlier. The QAO contains not just yeasts that produce alcohol, but also molds that break down starches into fermentable sugars and various bacteria. This multi-species microbial party is what gives ancient Chinese alcohol its unique character, but also its inherent instability. What if the wrong yeast strain takes over? What if a toxin-producing mold thrives instead of the beneficial ones? The ancient brewer had no way of knowing. Relying on the mysterious alchemy of the QAO and the vague hope that things would turn out all right. You can almost feel the sticky sweetness of the fermenting mash and the faint, unsettling whiff of something off. You find yourself hovering over a single drop of the murky brine from a fermenting jar. What appears to be still liquid to the naked eye is, in fact, a teeming universe. Tiny, rod-shaped bacteria swim and multiply with astonishing speed. Spherical yeasts bud and grow, releasing gases that cause the gentle bubbling you observed earlier. Even filamentous molds, with their intricate hyphae, spread silently. This is a microscopic ecosystem, a bustling metropolis of life, where every inhabitant plays a role in the transformation of food. Consider the dangers of uncontrolled fermentation. While yeast produces ethanol, the alcohol you want, other microbes, if left unchecked, can produce undesirable compounds. These might include fusel alcohols, higher alcohols that contribute to hangovers and can be toxic in larger quantities, aldehydes, or even methanol. Methanol, a highly toxic alcohol, can be produced in small amounts during fermentation, particularly if certain pectins are present in the raw materials. If concentrated through early rudimentary distillation, methanol poisoning could lead to blindness, organ damage, and death. Imagine taking a sip of your celebratory drink, and suddenly your vision starts to blur, then fades to black. Imagine the ancient fermenter peering into their jar. They saw the bubbles. They smelled the changes. They tasted the evolving flavors. But they had no idea why it was happening. They didn't know that these tiny, invisible entities were consuming sugars, producing acids, alcohol, and gases. They simply observed the effects, attributing the magic to intuition, tradition, or perhaps even the spirits. This fundamental lack of understanding about the true agents of fermentation was both its greatest strength because it worked and its most terrifying weakness. It's like trying to drive a car without knowing what an engine is. And sometimes that engine just explodes. One obscure detail from ancient alcohol production is the practice of mother liquor, or old lees, juzao retention. Brewers would often keep a portion of the fermented mash from a successful batch and add it to a new one, believing it would seed the new batch with good qualities. While this intuitively helped propagate beneficial microbes, it also meant that if a mother liquor batch was contaminated with undesirable or toxin-producing organisms, that contamination could be carried forward, batch after batch, creating a persistent, unseen danger. It's like trying to make a perfect copy of a document, but the original has a secret, invisible virus that infects every new version. You watch as a batch of vegetables, packed imperfectly, begins to go awry. Perhaps there wasn't enough salt, or a pocket of air remained trapped within the jar. Suddenly, the beneficial lactic acid bacteria, the good guys that produce the preserving acid, are outcompeted. Other less desirable microbes, often putrefying bacteria, begin to take over. The smell changes, subtly at first, then becoming distinctly foul, a sickly sweet rotten odor that signals decay rather than deliciousness. This is when the microbes go rogue, turning a promise of preservation into a putrid mess. The academic debate surrounding ancient alcohol poisoning often struggles with distinguishing between simple drunkenness, acute alcohol poisoning from excessive ethanol, and poisoning from other toxic byproducts, like methanol or fusel alcohols. Historical accounts rarely provide the detailed symptoms needed for a definitive diagnosis. Historians and toxicologists debate how widespread methanol poisoning was, and whether ancient people had any understanding of its specific dangers, or if it was simply lumped in with other bad luck or illness after drinking. It's a grim puzzle, trying to figure out how many ancient hangovers were actually life-threatening. Consider the sheer speed at which these unseen killers could multiply. A single bacterium, under ideal conditions, can divide every 20 minutes. In just a few hours, a handful of harmful microbes could become millions, producing enough toxins to sicken or even kill an entire family. The ancient fermenter, lacking refrigeration, was in a constant race against time, a race they often lost. You can almost feel the invisible clock ticking, counting down to potential disaster. You also witness the dangers of improper storage of finished alcohol. While alcohol itself is a preservative, if the containers were not properly sealed, or if they were stored in fluctuating temperatures, spoilage organisms could still thrive. Mold could grow on the surface, or bacteria could turn the alcohol into vinegar, or worse, produce toxins. The ancient brewer, without airtight seals or climate control, was constantly battling against these forces of decay, even after the fermentation was complete. It's like finally catching a dangerous animal, but then realizing its cage isn't quite secure. One obscure detail is the specific danger of Clostridium botulinum. This bacterium thrives in anaerobic, oxygen-free, low-acid environments, precisely the conditions found in improperly fermented or sealed foods. It produces one of the most potent toxins known to man, botulinum toxin, which causes botulism, a severe and often fatal neuroparalytic illness. While rare, a single contaminated jar of fermented beans or fish could wipe out an entire household, leaving no obvious signs of spoilage beyond a slightly off smell or taste. It's the ultimate silent killer, a microscopic assassin in your dinner. The strength of ancient alcohol also varied wildly. Without precise measurement tools, brewers relied on taste, smell, and empirical observation. A batch could be unexpectedly potent, leading to accidental acute alcohol poisoning, especially for those unaccustomed to strong drinks. Or it could be weak and prone to spoilage. This unpredictability added another layer of risk to consumption. Imagine taking a sip, expecting a mild buzz, and instead, you're suddenly on the floor. The academic debate surrounding this topic often grapples with the retrospective diagnosis of ancient foodborne illnesses, while historical texts might describe symptoms consistent with food poisoning. definitively identifying the specific microbial culprit like Salmonella, E. coli, or Clostridium botulinum is nearly impossible without preserved biological samples. Historians and paleopathologists still debate the true prevalence and impact of specific microbial diseases on ancient populations, often relying on circumstantial evidence and comparative studies with modern outbreaks. It's like trying to solve a cold case from millennia ago with no DNA evidence. Consider the raw materials themselves. If the grains used for brewing were contaminated with molds like Aspergillus flavus, which produces aflatoxins, a potent carcinogen, or if they contained high levels of certain compounds that could be converted into toxins during fermentation, the resulting alcohol could be dangerous even before the yeast began its work. The ancient brewer had no way to test the purity of their grains, making every starting point a potential risk. It's like trying to build a house with bricks that are already secretly crumbling. You also witness the dangers of molds. While some molds are beneficial in fermentation, like those used for cubu or certain cheeses, others produce potent mycotoxins. A fuzzy green or black growth on the surface of a ferment wasn't just unsightly. It could be a sign of hidden, dangerous toxins that could cause liver damage, kidney failure, or even cancer over long-term exposure. The ancient people, seeing the visible mold, might scrape it off, assuming the food underneath was safe, unaware of the invisible toxins that had permeated the entire batch. It's like trying to remove a poisonous snake by just cutting off its head, while its venom is already coursing through your veins. The process of early, rudimentary distillation, which became more common in later dynasties. But even early concentration methods existed introduced new dangers. While distillation could purify alcohol, it could also concentrate harmful compounds like methanol if the process wasn't carefully controlled. Without precise temperature regulation to separate different alcohol fractions, the head, which contains methanol, could easily be mixed into the potable spirit, leading to tragic consequences. The ancient distiller was playing with fire, literally, and often with invisible poisons. It's a bit like trying to refine gold, but accidentally making a deadly gas instead. The lack of understanding about cross-contamination was another major vulnerability. Imagine the same hands, the same unwashed containers, the same surfaces used for different stages of fermentation, or even for raw ingredients and finished products. Microbes from one source could easily transfer to another, introducing unwanted and dangerous strains into a perfectly good ferment. There was no concept of sterile technique, no antiseptic. It was a free-for-all for bacteria, and your gut was the ultimate prize. You might hear hushed stories of bad wine, not just wine that tasted terrible, but wine that caused strange illnesses, blindness, or even death. These tales, passed down through generations, were a grim reminder of the hidden dangers in the cup. The fear of such a batch would have been a constant anxiety for brewers and consumers alike. It's like a sommelier's worst nightmare, but with a body count. Consider the environmental factors, temperature fluctuations, humidity levels, and even the presence of certain insects could influence the microbial balance within a ferment. A sudden heat wave could accelerate the growth of spoilage organisms, while a cold snap could stall beneficial fermentation, leaving the food vulnerable. The ancient fermenter was constantly at the mercy of their environment, a silent partner in their microbial gamble. It's like trying to control a delicate chemical reaction without a thermostat or a fume hood. The academic debate also touches upon the social and cultural responses to these dangers. Did ancient societies develop specific rituals or beliefs to mitigate the risks of alcohol consumption? Were there traditional remedies for alcohol poisoning? And how effective were they? How did the awareness of these dangers shape the social norms around drinking, leading to practices like ceremonial toasts or controlled consumption? It's a fascinating interplay between risk, culture, and survival. The process of making ku, the starter culture, was particularly risky. If the grains used for QU were contaminated, or if the conditions for its growth were not ideal, the kuadu itself could become a source of dangerous microbes or toxins. Using a bad batch of QU was like planting a poison seed. The entire harvest was doomed from the start. And because QU was often reused or shared, a single contaminated batch could spread illness throughout a community. It's a bit like sharing a sourdough starter. But if your starter could give everyone food poisoning, you realize that for the ancient Chinese, the pursuit of alcohol was a journey into a fascinating yet dangerous abyss. It offered joy and solace, but also carried the terrifying potential for unseen poisons and unpredictable outcomes. The ingenuity was immense, but the risks were equally profound, a constant reminder that even the most celebrated of fermented products could turn into a silent killer. You might hear the desperate cries of families struck down by a mysterious illness after consuming a fermented meal. The symptoms could be varied: severe vomiting, debilitating diarrhea, paralysis, or even sudden death. The ancient people, unable to pinpoint the microscopic cause, might attribute it to an evil spirit, a curse, or simply bad luck. The terror was amplified by the invisibility of the enemy, the insidious nature of the attack. It's a horror story where the monster is too small to see. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost taste the phantom bitterness of those toxic brews, the dizzying confusion of unexpected potency, and the chilling thought of a celebratory drink turning deadly. You gain a profound appreciation for the science that now ensures the safety and consistency of our alcoholic beverages. The ancient world, for all its wisdom, was a much riskier place to drink, a constant dance with the unseen forces of fermentation. And as the soft, earthy smells of the ancient brewery begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling vat. The trial and error learning process meant that generations suffered through illness and death before relatively safe methods were established. Every successful batch was a hard-won victory. Every spoiled batch a potential tragedy. The knowledge they accumulated was literally written in the suffering of their ancestors. It's a grim thought, but true. You've braved the depths of ancient alcohol production, understanding the hidden perils in every potent sip. Now, let's confront a universal challenge that plagued every ancient household, every brewer, every fermenter. How do you know if your food, particularly your fermented food, is safe to eat? Tonight, you'll learn how ancient people, without microscopes or chemical tests, tried, often too late, to identify dangerously spoiled fermented products, relying on their senses in a desperate gamble against unseen toxins. The academic debate also touches upon the evolutionary arms race between humans and microbes. As humans developed fermentation to preserve food, microbes simultaneously evolved to exploit these new environments, leading to a constant struggle for dominance. Did certain populations develop genetic resistances to common foodborne pathogens due to this long-term exposure? It's a fascinating question of co-evolution, played out on the ancient dinner plate. You find yourself in a bustling, ancient kitchen, the morning light filtering through a smoke hole in the roof, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A woman approaches a large clay pot containing what should be a batch of perfectly pickled vegetables, perhaps cabbage or radishes. Her brow is furrowed with concentration, her senses on high alert. This isn't just about taste, it's about survival. Every visual cue, every subtle aroma, every faint sound from the pot is being meticulously scrutinized. This is their ancient, high-stakes version of food quality control, where the stakes are, quite literally, life or death. You realize that the ancient fermenter was a true pioneer, a brave soul venturing into uncharted microbial territory. They were working with forces they couldn't see, couldn't measure, and barely understood. Their success was a testament to their keen observation, their patience, and their willingness to learn from painful mistakes. But their failures were often catastrophic, a grim reminder of the power of the unseen. Imagine the pressure. You've invested time, effort, and precious ingredients into this ferment. Your family might be relying on it for sustenance through the lean months. To discard it is a significant loss, but to consume it if it's spoiled could mean agonizing illness or even death. The decision weighs heavily. You watch as she slowly lifts the lid, her nose twitching, her eyes scanning the surface. She's looking for the telltale signs of ruin, the whispers of decay that signal danger. It's like being a detective, but the clues are invisible, and the criminal is a microscopic assassin. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost feel the invisible currents of microbial life, the silent battles being fought within every fermenting jar. You gain a profound appreciation for the modern understanding of microbiology, the sterile environments, and the safety regulations that protect us from these unseen killers. The ancient world, for all its ingenuity, was a much riskier place to eat, a constant dance with the microscopic unknown. And as the soft, earthy smells of the cellar begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling jar. A common historical fact is that ancient people relied heavily on their senses of sight, smell, and taste to determine the edibility and safety of food, especially fermented products. While these senses could detect obvious spoilage, they were often insufficient to identify the presence of dangerous toxins or pathogens, as they did not produce noticeable changes in appearance or odor. You've peered into the unseen world of microbes, understanding how these tiny entities could turn from beneficial allies into deadly adversaries. Now, let's delve deeper into the grim consequences of those microbial battles gone wrong. Tonight, you'll discover how incorrect fermentation, a process meant to preserve and nourish, could instead produce lethal compounds, turning seemingly innocent food into a silent, insidious killer. This isn't just about spoilage. It's about the creation of invisible poisons, lurking in the very meals meant to sustain life. You observe her visual inspection. Is there an unusual color? Perhaps a strange, unnatural hue to the brine, or a dull, grayish tint to the vegetables that wasn't there before? Is there an unfamiliar film or scum on the surface that isn't the usual beneficial yeast bloom? Are there any signs of mold growth that look suspicious? Not the white, powdery bloom of good molds, but fuzzy green, black, or even pink patches. These visual cues were the first line of defense, the initial red flags that something had gone terribly wrong. You can almost feel her eyes straining, searching for any anomaly. You find yourself in a humble, ancient dwelling, the air heavy with a sickly, sweet-sour smell that makes your stomach clench. On a low table sits a bowl of what appears to be fermented beans, perhaps a batch of jang gone awry, or a simple beaned paste left too long in the wrong conditions. The color is off, a dull, unappetizing hue, and there's a faint, almost metallic sheen on the surface. To the ancient eye, it might just look unappetizing. To your modern sensibilities, it screams danger. This is a toxic brew, a byproduct of microbial activity that has veered wildly off course. Then comes the smell test. She brings her nose cautiously closer to the opening of the pot. Taking a tentative sniff, the aroma should be pleasantly sour, perhaps a little earthy or yeasty, depending on the ferment. But if it's putrid, overtly rotten, or has a sharp, acrid chemical smell, that's a clear warning. A sickly, sweet odor, like decaying fruit, often indicated the presence of undesirable putrefying bacteria. A faint, metallic tang could also be a bad sign. This olfactory inspection was critical, as many dangerous compounds, even without visible signs, would betray themselves through their stench. It's like trying to sniff out a bad egg, but the egg could make you blind. Imagine the confusion and despair. A family, perhaps weakened by hunger, consumes this seemingly innocuous food. They've gone through the effort of preparing it, of waiting for it to ferment, hoping for sustenance, but instead of nourishment, they receive a dose of poison. The symptoms might be immediate and violent: severe vomiting, debilitating diarrhea, intense abdominal pain, or they might be insidious, creeping in slowly, causing neurological damage, paralysis, or organ failure over hours or days. The terror is amplified by the betrayal of the food itself, turning from friend to foe. It's like being offered a comforting cup of tea, only to find it laced with venom. Consider the subtle sounds. While a healthy ferment might gurgle gently, an overly active, uncontrolled fermentation could produce an aggressive hiss or pop, indicating excessive gas buildup. This might be a sign that the wrong kind of microbes are thriving, or that the ferment is producing too much pressure, risking a burst container. The ancient fermenter would listen intently, trying to interpret the language of the bubbling, hoping it spoke of health, not danger. You can almost hear the faint, unsettling pop that signals trouble. A common historical fact is that various forms of food poisoning, including those caused by bacterial toxins, were a significant cause of illness and death in ancient societies. Without knowledge of microbiology or proper sterilization techniques, people were highly vulnerable to toxins produced by bacteria, like Staphylococcus aureus, often from unwashed hands or improper temperature control, or Clostridium perfringens, common in improperly cooked and cooled meats. These toxins could cause rapid onset of severe gastrointestinal distress. One obscure detail from this period is the practice of observing the behavior of insects around fermented foods. If flies, particularly certain types, were unusually attracted to a ferment, or if they seemed to avoid it entirely in a way that was uncharacteristic, it could be interpreted as a sign of spoilage or toxicity, while not scientifically accurate. This empirical observation was a desperate attempt to gather any available information about the food's safety. It's like using flies as tiny, unwitting food safety inspectors and hoping they don't get sick. You observe the subtle signs that the ancient fermenter might have missed or misinterpreted. Perhaps the jar didn't bubble quite right, or the color wasn't exactly what it should be. The smell might have been slightly off, but not overtly putrid, making the decision to consume it a desperate gamble. In a world where food was precious, throwing away an entire batch due to a subtle off-note was a difficult choice, often made only when the signs of danger were undeniable. This constant negotiation between risk and hunger was a terrifying daily reality. It's like trying to defuse a bomb with only your nose, and the timer is your stomach. The academic debate surrounding the recognition of spoilage often questions the effectiveness of these sensory methods against truly dangerous, odorless, or tasteless toxins. While obvious spoilage was detectable, how many cases of illness or death were caused by toxins that produced no noticeable sensory changes, such as botulinum toxin? Historians and food scientists debate the true limitations of ancient sensory-based food safety, and whether the high rates of foodborne illness were an inevitable consequence of this knowledge gap. It's a grim thought, trying to quantify the invisible threats that slipped past their senses. Consider the specific types of toxins produced by rogue microbes. Beyond the dramatic botulinum toxin we discussed earlier, many other bacteria produce enterotoxins that attack the digestive system, causing severe vomiting and diarrhea. Some molds produce mycotoxins, insidious poisons that can cause chronic health problems, including liver damage, kidney disease, and even cancer, often with no immediate acute symptoms. These silent killers could slowly erode health over time, their source unknown to the ancient consumer. Imagine a slow-acting poison, ingested daily, its effects only becoming apparent years later. You also witness the ultimate test taste. This was the riskiest step, often taken only after visual and olfactory inspection seemed promising. A tiny, tentative taste, if it was overly bitter, unusually pungent, or had a strange, metallic aftertaste, it was immediately spit out. But even a small taste could be dangerous if the toxin was potent enough. The ancient person had to trust their palate, their body's immediate reaction, to warn them of peril. This was the final desperate gamble, where their tongue was their last line of defense. It's like playing a game of truth or dare, and the dare is to taste potential poison. One obscure detail is the danger of biogenic amines, particularly histamine, which can be produced in fermented fish or meat products if they are not handled or fermented correctly. While not always fatal, histamine poisoning can cause severe allergic-like reactions, including flushing, headaches, dizziness, and gastrointestinal upset. Ancient people might have attributed these symptoms to an allergy to fish, unaware that it was a microbial byproduct of improper fermentation. It's like their ancient version of a bad food sensitivity, but with a much scarier cause. The process of learning these signs was often brutal. Mistakes were made, and people got sick, or worse. The knowledge was passed down through generations, often through cautionary tales and grim experiences. A mother would teach her child to recognize the bad smell of spoiled meat or the wrong color of a ferment, instilling a deep, almost primal caution. This empirical learning, though effective for obvious spoilage, was a slow and painful process. It's like learning to walk by repeatedly falling down. But sometimes Falling down means you don't get back up. The academic debate surrounding toxic byproducts often centers on the prevalence of chronic illnesses caused by long-term exposure to low levels of mycotoxins. While acute food poisoning is easier to identify in historical accounts, the insidious effects of chronic exposure are much harder to trace. Historians and epidemiologists still debate how much these unseen poisons contributed to overall morbidity and mortality rates, and whether certain regions or populations were disproportionately affected due to specific dietary practices or environmental conditions. It's like trying to track a ghost when the ghost is slowly making everyone sick. Consider the psychological impact. Every meal, especially one involving fermented foods, carried a subtle undercurrent of anxiety. Was it safe had they missed a sign? This constant vigilance, this low-level fear, would have been a pervasive part of daily life. The relief of consuming a safe meal would have been profound, a small victory against the ever-present threat of unseen dangers. It's a bit like living in a constant state of mild paranoia, but for good reason. You also witness the dangers of improper temperature control. Fermentation relies on specific temperature ranges for beneficial microbes to thrive. If the temperature is too high, spoilage organisms can grow rapidly, producing toxins. If it's too low, the beneficial fermentation might stall, leaving the food vulnerable to other, more dangerous microbes. The ancient fermenter, without thermometers, relied on instinct and experience, often guessing at the ideal conditions. This constant guesswork introduced a significant element of risk into every batch. It's like trying to bake a cake without knowing what temperature the oven is, and sometimes the cake is poisonous. The influence of environmental factors on spoilage was also intuitively understood. A ferment left in the sun would spoil faster. A jar left unsealed would attract more pests. The ancient fermenter learned to control these variables as best they could, creating cool, dark storage areas and sealing jars tightly, all in an effort to minimize the chances of ruin. They were trying to create the ideal conditions for the good microbes and the worst conditions for the bad ones. It's like trying to keep your house tidy, but the mess is alive and actively trying to take over. The lack of understanding about pH levels was another critical vulnerability. Many beneficial fermentations rely on the rapid production of acid to lower the pH, creating an environment inhospitable to harmful bacteria. If the acid production was too slow or insufficient, dangerous pathogens could flourish. The ancient people had no way to measure acidity, relying solely on taste, which could be misleading. A ferment that tasted slightly sour might still harbor dangerous toxins if its pH wasn't low enough. It's like trying to build a fortress without knowing if the walls are strong enough. You might hear hushed conversations about a neighbor who got sick after eating a certain batch of pickled fish, or a family that suffered after drinking a particular brew. These were not just gossip. They were vital pieces of information, shared warnings about what to avoid, what signs to look for. The community became a collective censor, sharing knowledge born from painful experience. It's like an ancient informal public health warning system, powered by tragedy. Consider the raw materials themselves. If the initial ingredients were already contaminated with high levels of harmful bacteria or molds, even a seemingly correct fermentation process might not be enough to eliminate the danger. Poor quality grains, bruised vegetables, or fish caught from polluted waters could introduce a dangerous microbial load from the start, making the entire batch a ticking time bomb. The ancient fermenter had no way to test the purity of their raw ingredients, making every starting point a potential risk. It's like starting a race with a broken leg. The academic debate also touches upon the development of traditional cures or remedies for food poisoning, while they lacked modern medical understanding. Ancient Chinese medicine developed various herbal concoctions and dietary interventions to alleviate symptoms of poisoning. Were these truly effective, or merely palliative? Did they inadvertently stumble upon compounds that neutralized certain toxins? Or was it largely a matter of trial and error, with limited real success against severe poisoning? It's a fascinating question of ancient pharmacology meeting modern toxicology. You might hear stories of bad batches, entire vats of fermented products that had to be discarded, or worse, consumed with tragic consequences. These were not just economic losses. They were potential human catastrophes. The knowledge of what constituted a bad batch was often learned through bitter experience, passed down as a grim warning. The fear of such a batch would have been a constant anxiety, a shadow over every fermentation effort. It's a bit like a chef having a signature dish, but sometimes that dish kills people. You realize that for the ancient Chinese, recognizing ruin was a desperate, sensory-driven art form. They were detectives of decay, relying on their eyes, noses, and tongues to identify the invisible threats that could turn their life-sustaining food into a deadly poison. Their ingenuity was immense, but their limitations were equally profound, making every meal a testament to their resilience and their constant gamble against the unseen. The absence of proper sealing techniques also contributed to the danger. While some ferments require exposure to air, others need anaerobic conditions. If a jar was improperly sealed, allowing oxygen to enter, it could encourage the growth of aerobic spoilage organisms that produced toxins. The ancient people relied on clay lids, wax seals, or simply cloths, none of which provided a perfect barrier against unwanted microbial invaders. It's like trying to protect your house from intruders with a flimsy screen door. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost taste the phantom bitterness of those spoiled ferments, the unsettling smell of decay, and the chilling thought of a hidden toxin. You gain a profound appreciation for the scientific understanding and rigorous testing that now ensure the safety of our food. The ancient world, for all its wisdom, was a much riskier place to eat, a constant dance with the unseen forces of spoilage. And as the soft, earthy smells of the ancient kitchen begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling pot. The concept of invisible contamination was entirely foreign. They couldn't see the bacteria, couldn't see the toxins. They only saw the aftermath. This made prevention incredibly difficult. They might meticulously clean their jars, but if their hands or the water they used were contaminated, the effort was in vain. It's a horror movie where the monster is everywhere, but you can't see it until it's too late. You've seen the ancient struggle to identify spoiled food, a desperate dance with unseen dangers. Now, let's confront the grim reality behind that knowledge. Tonight, you'll experience the brutal, heartbreaking truth of how ancient people learned about safe fermentation through generations of painful, often fatal, experimentation. This isn't a story of scientific breakthroughs in a lab. It's a saga of trial by error, where every successful batch was a hard-won victory. and every mistake carried the ultimate cost. The academic debate also touches upon the development of traditional remedies and antidotes for food poisoning. While they lacked modern medical understanding, ancient Chinese medicine developed various herbal concoctions and dietary interventions to alleviate symptoms of poisoning. Were these truly effective, or merely palliative? Did they inadvertently stumble upon compounds that neutralized certain toxins, or was it largely a matter of trial and error, with limited real success against severe poisoning? It's a fascinating question of ancient pharmacology meeting modern toxicology. You find yourself in a small ancient village, the air heavy with a quiet sorrow. A family mourns, not from war, not from famine, but from a silent, insidious enemy that came from within their own food supply. Perhaps it was a batch of fermented fish that turned toxic, or a new type of pickled vegetable that harbored a deadly mold. The exact cause is unknown to them, but the consequence is tragically clear. This scene, repeated countless times across millennia, is the true cost of knowledge in a world without science. It's like trying to learn to fly by jumping off a cliff and hoping you don't hit the ground too hard. You realize that for the ancient Chinese, the act of fermentation was a constant tightrope walk between life and death. It was a brilliant solution to a fundamental problem, but one fraught with unseen perils. Every bubbling jar held the promise of sustenance, but also the terrifying potential for a silent, agonizing demise. The ingenuity was immense, but the risks were equally profound. Imagine the sheer courage, or perhaps desperation, required for early experimentation. Someone, somewhere left food out, observed it change, and then, driven by hunger or curiosity, decided to taste it. Sometimes it was a pleasant surprise, a new flavor, a longer-lasting food. Other times it was a swift, agonizing descent into illness or death. Each outcome, whether good or bad, contributed to a growing body of empirical knowledge. But the error part of trial and error was often brutally unforgiving. You can almost feel the knot of fear in your stomach, knowing that your next meal could be the one that teaches a grim lesson. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost taste the bitter tang of those toxic brews, the phantom ache of a stomach turned by unseen poisons. You gain a profound appreciation for the science that now protects us, the understanding that allows us to ferment safely and consistently. The ancient world, for all its wisdom, was a much more dangerous place to eat, a constant dance with the microscopic unknown, and as the soft, earthy smells of the cellar begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling jar. A common historical fact is that much of humanity's early technological and culinary knowledge, including complex processes like fermentation, was acquired through generations of empirical observation, accidental discoveries, and painful, often fatal, experimentation. There was no scientific method, no controlled variables, just repeated attempts and the harsh lessons of nature. You've seen the invisible dangers lurking within fermented foods, the insidious toxins born from microbial missteps. But now, let's pull back and look at the broader picture, the environment in which these vital transformations took place. Tonight, you'll journey into the ancient kitchens and food preparation areas, places where a lack of understanding about hygiene created a constant, low-level chaos of contamination, inviting dangerous microbial invaders into every meal, fermented or otherwise. This isn't just about bad bacteria in a jar. It's about the pervasive, unseen threats that permeated daily life. You observe the transmission of this knowledge. It wasn't written down in textbooks. It was passed orally, from parent to child, from elder to apprentice. Always add this much salt. Never ferment that plant. Watch for this color, this smell. These were not abstract rules. They were distilled wisdom, born from the collective suffering of ancestors. Each piece of advice was a tiny monument to a past tragedy, a warning etched into the collective memory. It's like their ancient version of an instruction manual, but every page was stained with tears. You find yourself in a bustling, ancient household, perhaps a large family compound or a communal cooking space. The air is thick with the smells of cooking, but also with dust, the faint odor of animal waste from nearby pens, and the general grime of human activity. There's no running water, no soap as you know it, and certainly no sterile surfaces. Hands, often unwashed, move from tending fires to handling raw meat, then to preparing vegetables, and finally to serving food. This isn't a deliberate act of carelessness. It's simply the way things are. A world where the concept of microscopic germs is millennia away from discovery. Consider the specific dangers that had to be learned through direct, painful experience. How long was too long to ferment? What was the right temperature range? Which types of molds were beneficial, and which were deadly? What kind of water was safe to use? These were not questions that could be answered by reading a book. They were answered by people getting sick, by families dying, by entire communities being decimated. Every safe practice we take for granted today, proper sealing, temperature control, specific starter cultures, was once a hard-won lesson, paid for in human lives. You can almost hear the hushed whispers of caution carried on the wind. Imagine the sheer volume of microbial exchange happening constantly. A child playing in the dirt, then reaches for a piece of fruit. A cook having just butchered a chicken, then kneads dough for bread without washing their hands. Water, drawn from a communal well or river, is used for drinking, cooking, and washing, often without any purification. Every surface, every tool, every pair of hands is a potential vector for contamination. It's like a microscopic roller disco, and all the dancers are pathogens. One obscure detail from this learning process is the development of specific, often localized, taboos or superstitions around certain foods or fermentation practices. If a particular type of fermented food consistently caused illness in a region, it might become associated with bad spirits, or deemed unlucky, leading to its abandonment. While not scientifically accurate, these taboos served a vital public health function, preventing people from repeating dangerous mistakes. It's like their ancient version of a "do not eat" sign, but enforced by fear of the supernatural. A common historical fact is that ancient societies lacked a scientific understanding of germ theory, which meant that basic hygiene practices like thorough hand washing, proper sanitation, and separation of raw and cooked foods were not consistently followed. This significantly contributed to the spread of foodborne illnesses and other infectious diseases. The academic debate surrounding this cost of knowledge often grapples with the ethical implications of historical research. How do we responsibly interpret the suffering of past populations who were essentially living experiments for the development of fundamental technologies? historians and bioethicists debate the extent to which we can truly understand the psychological and social impact of living in a world where every meal carried such inherent risks, and how this constant threat shaped their worldview. It's a profound question, trying to comprehend the human price of progress. You observe the storage of food. Grains are kept in large, open bins, susceptible to rodents and insects, whose droppings can introduce harmful bacteria. Meat, if not immediately preserved, hangs exposed to flies and dust. Vegetables are often stored on the ground or in uncleaned baskets. There's no concept of airtight containers or temperature-controlled environments. Every storage method, while practical for the time, was also an open invitation for microbial proliferation. Imagine your pantry being a free-for-all for every pest and pathogen in the neighborhood. You also witness the role of natural selection. Those who intuitively or accidentally adopted safer fermentation practices, or who were more resilient to certain toxins, were more likely to survive and pass on their knowledge and their genes. Over generations, this could lead to a subtle, unconscious selection for safer methods, and perhaps even some degree of genetic adaptation within populations. It's a grim form of culinary evolution, where only the safest recipes and the hardiest eaters survived. Consider the water source again. We've touched on its dangers before, but it bears repeating in the context of hygiene. The same river that provides drinking water might also be used for washing clothes, bathing, and even disposing of waste upstream. Wells, while often cleaner, could still be contaminated by surface runoff or by unhygienic drawing methods. Every drop of water, unless boiled, carried a hidden risk. This contaminated water was not just consumed. It was used to wash food, to clean utensils, and to prepare brines for fermentation, effectively spreading pathogens throughout the entire food chain. It's like trying to clean a mess with a dirty rag, and then wondering why the mess is getting worse. The psychological toll on the ancient fermenter must have been immense. Every new batch was a gamble. Every time a family member fell ill, they might have wondered if it was their fault, if they had made a mistake in the preparation. This constant anxiety, this burden of responsibility, would have been a heavy weight. The relief of a successful, safe batch would have been profound, but fleeting, always overshadowed by the memory of past tragedies. It's like being a chef, but every dish you cook has a tiny chance of being poisoned, and you're the one who has to serve it. The tools themselves, simple and effective for their purpose, were rarely sterilized. Stone grinding querns, wooden cutting boards, and earthenware pots might be rinsed with water, but they would retain microscopic residues from previous uses, creating a biofilm where bacteria could thrive. A knife used to cut raw meat might then be used to slice cooked vegetables without a thorough cleaning. This constant cross-contamination was a silent, insidious threat, turning seemingly safe food into a carrier of disease. You can almost feel the rough, porous surfaces, imagining the unseen life teeming within them. Consider the limitations of their communication. Without widespread literacy or rapid communication networks, knowledge spread slowly. A discovery about a safer method in one village might take generations to reach another, or might never spread at all. This meant that the same painful lessons were often learned repeatedly in isolated communities, multiplying the human cost. It's like trying to share vital information. but you can only whisper it to one person at a time, and they might forget it. One obscure detail from ancient hygienic practices or lack thereof is the common use of human and animal waste as fertilizer for crops. While this was a highly effective method for enriching the soil and boosting agricultural yields, it also created a direct pathway for pathogens, including parasites and bacteria, to contaminate fresh produce. Without proper composting or treatment, these contaminants could easily transfer to vegetables and fruits, even after washing. It's a grim irony. The very thing that made food grow could also make you terribly sick. The development of specific tools and techniques also came from this process. The observation that certain types of jars worked better, or that specific temperatures yielded safer results, led to the gradual refinement of equipment and methods. The invention of better seals, more stable containers, or improved QU production methods were all born from the desire to reduce risk and increase consistency. These innovations, seemingly small, were monumental achievements, each one a victory against the unseen dangers. It's like inventing a safer car, but only after countless crashes. The academic debate surrounding ancient hygiene often tries to quantify the impact of these practices on public health. While it's clear that lack of hygiene was a major factor in disease, precisely how much it contributed to specific outbreaks versus, say, natural disasters or nutritional deficiencies is a complex epidemiological challenge. Historians debate the relative importance of different vectors of disease transmission in ancient populations, and how much traditional beliefs about cleanliness, which often differed from modern scientific understanding, actually mitigated these risks. It's like trying to untangle a 1,000-year-old knot of interconnected problems. You might hear the desperate prayers offered before a meal, or the solemn rituals performed over a new batch of ferment. These were not just acts of faith, they were expressions of hope, a plea to the unseen forces that governed their world to grant them safety and sustenance. The spiritual realm was intertwined with the practicalities of food, a reflection of their profound vulnerability. It's a bit like saying grace, but with a lot more genuine terror behind it. You also witness the lack of proper waste disposal. Food scraps, animal bones, and human waste are often discarded haphazardly, attracting pests and creating breeding grounds for bacteria and flies. These unsanitary conditions around dwellings and food preparation areas ensured a constant supply of pathogens, ready to contaminate any exposed food. The air itself, thick with the scent of decay and waste, was a constant reminder of the pervasive lack of sanitation. It's like living in a perpetual garbage dump, and your food is right in the middle of it. The academic debate also touches upon the role of super tasters, or individuals with heightened sensory perception. Did certain people with more sensitive noses or palates play a crucial role in identifying dangerous spoilage, thus acting as early food safety experts within their communities? And how did their insights contribute to the collective knowledge base? It's a fascinating question of individual biological differences impacting collective survival. Consider the role of insects, flies, attracted to food and waste, would alight on both, carrying bacteria from one surface to another. Cockroaches and other crawling insects would scuttle across floors and food preparation areas, leaving behind a trail of contamination. These tiny vectors, though seemingly insignificant, played a major role in the spread of foodborne illnesses, silently ferrying pathogens from the unsanitary environment directly to the dinner plate. It's a bit like living in a house where all the delivery drivers are covered in germs. You realize that for the ancient Chinese, every safe meal was a triumph, a testament to the hard-won knowledge accumulated over countless generations. The delicious flavors of their fermented foods, the very stability they provided, were built on a foundation of suffering, of mistakes, and of lives lost. It's a sobering thought, but one that underscores the incredible resilience and ingenuity of humanity. The absence of pest control as we know it meant that rodents were constant companions. Rats and mice, drawn to food storage, would gnaw through containers, contaminate grains with their droppings and urine, and spread diseases like leptospirosis and hantavirus. The battle against these furry invaders was a never-ending one, often fought with limited success. Imagine trying to keep your food safe when a small army of rodents is constantly trying to break into your pantry. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost feel the phantom ache of past illnesses, the chilling silence of a family in mourning, and the profound weight of knowledge gained through such a brutal process. You gain a profound appreciation for the scientific understanding that now protects us, the rigorous testing, and the safety regulations that ensure our food is not a gamble. The ancient world, for all its wisdom, was a much riskier place to eat, a constant dance with the unseen forces of spoilage, where the cost of learning was paid in human lives. And as the soft, earthy smells of the ancient kitchen begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling pot. The very act of communal eating, while fostering social bonds, also facilitated the rapid spread of disease. Shared bowls, communal serving spoons, and the close proximity of diners meant that if one person was ill, or if one dish was contaminated, the entire group was at risk. There was no concept of individual portions or sterile serving. It's a bit like everyone sharing the same toothbrush. But for dinner, you've journeyed through the harrowing history of ancient fermentation, witnessing the brutal cost of knowledge, the unseen dangers, and the constant gamble against microbial forces. Now, as our story draws to a close, let's bring it into the present. Tonight, you'll discover how the ancient risks of fermentation, though largely mitigated by modern science, still whisper to us from history, shaping our practices, our understanding, and even our subconscious caution around the foods we love. The echoes of those past dangers linger, a silent reminder of humanity's long, arduous path to safe sustenance. You might hear stories of stomach upsets or fevers that swept through families or villages, often attributed to bad air, angry spirits, or simply bad luck. The true culprit, an invisible army of microbes thriving in unsanitary conditions, remained unknown. This lack of understanding made prevention incredibly difficult, as people couldn't fight an enemy they didn't know existed. It's a horror story where the monster is everywhere, but you can't see it until it's too late. You find yourself in a modern kitchen, perhaps your own. The refrigerator hums softly, keeping food perfectly chilled. Your pantry holds airtight containers, and your spices are neatly organized. You might be preparing a dish with soy sauce, a fermented bean paste, or perhaps even a glass of wine. You take for granted the safety, the consistency, the sheer reliability of these products. But beneath this modern veneer of control, the ancient whispers of danger still exist, subtly influencing how we interact with fermented foods. Even today, the academic debate also delves into how ancient societies adapted to these constant threats. Did they develop some level of natural immunity through repeated exposure? Were certain traditional food preparation methods like prolonged cooking or fermentation inadvertently effective at reducing pathogen loads, even without understanding why it's a complex interplay between human resilience and environmental challenge? Imagine the unconscious caution we still hold. You wouldn't blindly eat something that smells off, even if it's a modern fermented product. You instinctively check expiration dates, and you're wary of unusual colors or textures. These are not just learned behaviors from modern food safety campaigns. They are echoes of millennia of trial and error, a deep-seated, almost primal instinct to recognize ruin, that little voice in your head that says, maybe not, is a direct descendant of an ancient ancestor who learned the hard way. It's like your gut feeling is actually a historical archive of food poisoning. You realize that the ancient fermenter, in their quest for preservation, was fighting a battle on multiple fronts. Not only did they have to contend with the unpredictable nature of the microbes within their jars, but also with the constant barrage of contamination from their immediate environment. Every step of the food journey, from field to table, was fraught with unseen risks. A common historical fact is that while modern food science and industrial processes have drastically reduced the risks associated with fermentation, the fundamental principles of microbial control and hygiene that were painstakingly discovered through ancient trial and error remain central to safe production today. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost feel the pervasive grime, the phantom itch of unseen insects, and the subtle, sickening smells of an unhygienic world. You gain a profound appreciation for the clean water, the soap, the refrigeration, and the food safety regulations that protect us today. The ancient world, for all its ingenuity, was a much riskier place to eat, a constant dance with the microscopic unknown. And as the soft, earthy smells of the ancient dwelling begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every meal. You observe the subtle ways ancient risks have shaped modern practices. The rigorous quality control in a soy sauce factory, for instance, isn't just about taste. It's about ensuring the absence of harmful bacteria and toxins that plagued ancient brewers. The precise temperature controls, the sterilization of equipment, the use of pure starter cultures. These are all direct responses to the unpredictable dangers of wild fermentation and contamination that we discussed earlier. Every safety protocol is a monument to a past mistake. It's like they built a fortress around their food, brick by brick, from the lessons of countless sieges. You've navigated the murky waters of ancient hygiene, understanding how pervasive contamination was a constant threat. Now, let's talk about the very heart of ancient fermentation, the invisible catalysts that made it all possible, the wild cultures. Tonight, you'll uncover the unpredictable risks of relying on these naturally occurring, uncontrolled fermentation starters, where every batch was truly a roll of the dice, and the outcome was as much about luck as it was about skill. Consider the lingering academic debates. While we have scientific answers now, historians and food scientists continue to explore the nuances of ancient fermentation, trying to understand how specific microbial communities evolved how indigenous knowledge was passed down, and how ancient practices inadvertently mitigated certain risks. The questions about the true prevalence of ancient foodborne illnesses and the specific toxins involved continue to fuel research, a testament to the enduring mystery of those unseen killers. It's like they're still trying to solve a cold case, but the evidence is buried under thousands of years of dirt. You find yourself observing an ancient fermenter, not in a sterile lab, but in a rustic courtyard. They are preparing to make cuckoo, the essential starter culture for many fermented products, especially alcoholic beverages and jang fermented paste. You watch as they mix cooked grains, perhaps millet or wheat, with water, forming a dough. This dough is then shaped into bricks or cakes and left exposed to the ambient air, often in a warm, humid environment. There's no packet of commercial yeast, no carefully cultivated bacterial strain. They are literally inviting the unseen world to colonize their food. One obscure detail that persists is the regional variation in fermentation practices. Even today, different parts of China, and indeed the world, have unique fermented foods and distinct methods of preparation. These regional differences are not just about culinary preference. They often reflect ancient adaptations to local environments, available ingredients, and the specific microbial cultures that thrived there. The wild cultures of the past, though now often cultivated, still leave their fingerprint on the diverse flavors of modern fermented foods. It's like a culinary dialect, spoken through the flavors of fermented cabbage. Imagine the leap of faith. The ancient fermenter knew that certain conditions, certain environments, worked better than others. They might use a piece of an old, successful cuckoo cake to seed a new batch, or they might simply rely on the microbes floating in the air, settling on the grains. They understood that something invisible was at work, transforming their raw materials, but they had no way of knowing which specific microbes would land on their cuckoo cake, or which ones would thrive. It's like throwing a party and sending out an open invitation to every single person in the city, hoping only the fun ones show up. The academic debate also touches upon the concept of cultural memory of food safety, even if individuals don't consciously know the historical dangers. Is there a collective, inherited caution embedded in cultural practices around food? Do certain traditional beliefs or rituals, seemingly superstitious, inadvertently reinforce safer handling or consumption habits passed down from a time when such caution was vital for survival? It's a fascinating question of how history subtly shapes our present behaviors. A common historical fact is that cuckoo has been used in China for thousands of years as a fermentation starter. Predating the understanding of microbiology, it's a complex mixture of molds, yeasts, and bacteria that spontaneously colonize cooked grains, providing the necessary enzymes and microorganisms for various fermentations, from alcohol to soy sauce. You also witness the continued appreciation for the craft of fermentation. Despite industrialization, there's a growing movement towards artisanal fermented foods, often emphasizing traditional methods and natural cultures. This isn't about recreating the dangers, but about recapturing the complex flavors and unique characteristics that arose from those ancient, less controlled processes. It's a nostalgic nod to the past, a way to connect with the culinary heritage that emerged from that trial-by-error journey. It's like appreciating a vintage car, even if it doesn't have airbags. You observe the subtle variations in the environment. One day, the air might be rich with beneficial yeasts from a nearby orchard. The next, it might carry spores of undesirable molds from a damp corner of the dwelling. The temperature, the humidity, the very breeze itself, all these factors influenced which microorganisms would colonize the QW cake. The fermenter, relying on intuition and generations of accumulated wisdom, would try to create the right conditions. But ultimate control was impossible. It's like trying to conduct an orchestra where half the musicians are invisible and decide to play whatever they want. The very act of cooking, particularly in traditional Chinese cuisine, often involves high heat methods like stir-frying and deep frying. While these are celebrated for their flavor and speed, they also serve a crucial ancient purpose, killing pathogens. This inherent safety mechanism, developed long before germ theory, was a practical response to the pervasive contamination of ancient times. The sizzle of the wok, a sound of culinary delight, is also a whisper of ancient protection. It's like every stir-fry is a tiny act of defiance against the invisible dangers of the past. Consider the sheer unpredictability. One batch of QW might be perfectly balanced, leading to a delicious and safe product. The next, made seemingly identically, could be dominated by spoilage bacteria, leading to a putrid mess. Or worse, it could harbor toxin-producing molds, turning the fermented food into a silent killer. The ancient fermenter had no quality control, no way to test the microbial composition of their starter. They learned through trial and error often came with a very high price. You can almost feel the tension in the air as they inspect a newly formed QU cake, hoping for the best. The lingering influence of food as medicine also reflects this legacy. While not always scientifically validated in a modern sense, the cultural belief in the therapeutic properties of certain foods and fermented products, like fermented black beans for digestion, or specific teas for cooling, the body continues to guide dietary choices. This holistic view of food, born from ancient observations of health and illness, remains a powerful undercurrent in Chinese culinary philosophy. It's like their ancient doctor is still giving dietary advice from beyond the grave. One obscure detail from the making of QU is the practice of leaving the grain cakes exposed in specific locations, sometimes even hanging them in rafters or placing them near old, successful fermentation vessels. This was an intuitive attempt to encourage the colonization by good microbes already present in the environment, essentially creating a primitive form of microbial inoculation, even without understanding the science behind it. It's like they were building a tiny, invisible microbial farm, hoping the right seeds would just float in. You might notice the subtle ways we still respect the life in fermented foods, the careful handling of sourdough starters, the nurturing of kombucha scobies, the understanding that these are living products. This reverence for the microbial world, though now scientifically understood, echoes the ancient awe and caution surrounding these powerful transformations. We know how they work, but we still treat them with a certain respect. It's like having a pet. But your pet makes delicious food and could potentially make you sick if you don't treat it right. The academic debate surrounding wild cultures often focuses on the evolutionary adaptation of specific microbial strains to particular regions and ingredients, did unique local microbial populations emerge that were particularly well suited for fermenting local grains or vegetables? And how much did the exchange of QAO cakes or fermented products along trade routes contribute to the spread and diversification of these microbial cultures? It's a fascinating question of microbial biogeography, played out over millennia. The sounds of a modern kitchen, with its whirring blenders and humming refrigerators, are a world away from the ancient cellar. Yet, the subtle gurgle of a homemade ferment, the pungent aroma of a good soy sauce, the satisfying pop of a pickle jar, these are the direct sensory links to that ancient world. They are the whispers of danger, now tamed, but still present in the cultural memory of our palates. You also witness the dangers of contamination from the environment during the QBU making process. Dust, insects, and even small rodents could introduce unwanted microbes to the exposed grain cakes. A fly landing on a QU cake could deposit harmful bacteria, setting the stage for a spoiled or toxic ferment. The ancient fermenter, doing their best to keep things clean by their standards, was fighting an invisible battle against ubiquitous contaminants. It's like trying to keep a secret when everyone around you is a gossip. You realize that the story of ancient fermentation isn't just a historical footnote. It's a profound narrative about human ingenuity, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of sustenance in the face of unseen threats. The dangers were real. The cost was high, but the knowledge gained was invaluable, laying the foundation for the safe, delicious, and diverse fermented foods we enjoy today. The lack of control over the specific yeast strains was particularly problematic for alcoholic beverages. While wild yeasts could produce alcohol, they often produced undesirable off flavors, or, more dangerously, could be outcompeted by other microbes that produced toxic byproducts. The strength and quality of the alcohol could vary wildly, leading to unpredictable potency and safety. Imagine taking a sip of your homemade ancient wine, and it's either perfectly pleasant or tastes like old socks and gives you a splitting headache. As you drift deeper into the quiet hum of the night, you can almost taste the complex layers of flavor in a perfectly fermented dish, knowing the long, perilous journey it took to reach your table. You gain a profound appreciation for the invisible world of microbes and the generations of ancestors who bravely, painfully, learned to harness its power. The whispers of danger are faint now, but they remind us of the incredible human story behind every bite. Consider the risk of cross-species contamination. If Ku, intended for making a savory paste, accidentally came into contact with ingredients for a sweet wine, the results could be disastrous, leading to unexpected flavors or even spoilage. The ancient fermenter had no way to isolate specific microbial strains, meaning every batch was a complex, multi-species microbial ecosystem, often with unpredictable interactions. It's like trying to run a zoo where all the animals are microscopic and constantly fighting each other. You have been on a perilous journey, exploring the invisible world of microorganisms and the terrifying risks of ancient fermentation, from spontaneous batches to toxic jars. You have witnessed the painful price of knowledge, paid for with harsh experiences, and sometimes with life. The process of drying and storing QBO cakes also carried risks. If not dried properly, or if stored in a damp environment, the QBO itself could become moldy or contaminated, rendering it useless or even dangerous for future fermentations. A bad batch of QU meant that any food fermented with it was likely doomed, a cascade of microbial failure. It's a bit like buying a car, and the engine is already broken before you even drive it off the lot. Now, as our story comes to a close, let these images and feelings gently pass through your mind. Think of the ancients who braved unseen threats, who persevered to learn from their mistakes, and who passed down that precious knowledge to generations. You might hear stories of cursed batches of kuo, where every ferment made from it went bad, leading to widespread illness or economic loss. These were not just superstitions. They were observations of microbial realities, understood through a pre-scientific lens. The fermenter would eventually discard the cursed kuo and try to start anew, hoping for better luck with the invisible forces that govern their craft. It's like trying to get rid of a bad omen, but the bad omen is actually a strain of E. coli. As you drift off to sleep, let the whispers of the past take you away. The bubbling of fermenting jars, the complex aroma of brews, and the quiet anxiety of potential dangers. All of this blends into a symphony of life, of survival, and of a civilization that has learned to harness invisible forces to survive. The academic debate also delves into how ancient people, despite their lack of scientific understanding, managed to consistently produce safe and effective fermented foods for millennia. Did they intuitively develop practices that inadvertently selected for beneficial microbes and suppressed harmful ones? Was there a form of microbial memory passed down through generations, where successful microbial communities were subtly maintained in the environment? It's a fascinating question of empirical wisdom and unconscious microbial engineering. Let your mind wander to ancient kitchens, where sophistication and danger coexist. Feel a deep gratitude for modern science, for the safety procedures we take for granted today. All of this, though thousands of years old, still resonates in every fermented dish. Every meal we eat, you realize that the ancient fermenter was a true pioneer, a brave soul venturing into uncharted microbial territory. They were working with forces they couldn't see, couldn't measure, and barely understood. Their success was a testament to their keen observation, their patience, and their willingness to learn from painful mistakes. But their failures were often catastrophic, a grim reminder of the power of the unseen. Sleep is coming, gently and softly. Let the stories of the dangers of ancient fermentation lull you into a peaceful dream, where the taste of history lingers on your tongue, and the safety of the present is cherished more than ever. As you stand in this ancient fermentation space, surrounded by the subtle hum of microbial activity, you gain a profound respect for the courage and resilience of the people who relied on this process. They embraced a technique that was both their salvation and a constant source of peril, navigating its unseen dangers with only their senses and their accumulated hard-won knowledge. The very act of eating fermented food was an act of faith, a gamble against the invisible forces of the microbial world. And as the soft, earthy smells of the cellar begin to lull you, you can almost feel the faint chill of uncertainty, a whisper of the hidden dangers that lay within every bubbling jar. Good night. You've seen the wild, unpredictable dance of microbes and the inherent risks of relying on uncontrolled cultures. Now, let's imagine that against all odds, your ancient fermenter has successfully coaxed their QO into life, and their vegetables have begun to bubble happily, The initial fermentation seems promising, but the journey from raw ingredient to safe, edible, long-lasting food isn't over yet. Tonight, you'll discover the terrifying truth about ancient food storage, where even a perfectly fermented product could turn into a source of sickness, and where the silent, unseen forces of decay could undo weeks of careful work, leading to true storage nightmares.